I actually look back on our accounting software system. We had in one day just under £1 million worth of revenue drop.
Whenever we're looking at doing a deal with a brand or a rights holder, the brand, before they even make any kind of decision or before they even put it up to the decision makers, is they're doing their due diligence, and their due diligence involves analysing what's their database size, what's the broadcast lens looking like.
The more senior you go up the pyramid, the more commitments you have. A chief exec has got to be there at the weekends. Maybe if they're involved in the women's team, then they're on a Sunday. All of a sudden it becomes this all-encompassing and all-consuming thing. So,
well, welcome to a very special episode of the Deal Room Sport with Sporting Group International and Sporting Jobs. New location, but the same panel. Fortunately, we've got Ian Dutton with us, we've got Adrian Wright, and we've got Harry Lynch as well. Welcome, gentlemen. How are we?
All good,
We're all good.
Now, I mentioned it's a special episode because it is the 10th anniversary of Sporting Group International. And not Sporting Jobs, does Sporting Jobs follow?
No, same.
Same,
Really,
was
same
it? Really?
birthday.
Same day.
Yep.
There we go. And to celebrate that, I mean, what a treat we have there. A wonderful cake. Who made this? Which one of you made this one?
Azada, was it?
Waitrose, I think it was.
Yeah. It's a Waitrose special, yeah.
But we can't light it because no one's got a lighter. Is that what we're saying?
That's it.
That's correct,
Okay.
yeah. We're non-smoking.
Okay. Well, we're here to celebrate 10 years of Sporting Group International and Sporting Jobs. We've got a few stats to start the podcast because who doesn't like a stat, hey? Right, so when you started, 10th of February, this is when we're filming this and recording it, it's officially 10 years since it all started. Donald Trump secured victory in the New Hampshire presidential primary. Do you feel happy sharing a special date with the
No
Trump?
comment, Ed.
No comment. Junior doctors went on strike in the UK. In the
No
world of
surprise
sport,
there.
Leicester City won the Premier League. Can you believe? 10 years ago now.
Wow.
Crazy.
There
And
you
we've got
go.
Sinji as one of our ambassadors, as you know.
Of course you have, yeah. We mentioned that on a previous podcast
Yeah.
episode. And the biggest news of all, Adrian Wright started Sporting Group International and Sporting Jobs.
Goes down in history, Ed.
Absolutely it does. So the big question is, why? I mean, you're at West Brom, you could have easily moved to another Premier League football club, I'm sure. I know you had offers. We've talked about those on previous episodes. So why go on your own?
Yeah, I think I got to a stage where I did cherish my weekends. That wasn't the reason for setting the business up, of course, but I had to think pretty long and hard about what I wanted to do next. Club would have been an easy option for me. I could have gone to, a number that I've had offers at previously, but I looked at what I was faced with in the last 2 or 3 years I was West Brom, and one was regularly getting phone calls about, we hear the club's being sold, Adrian. What are you doing when it gets sold? Are you staying? Are you going? And I was like, most of those people were from London. And they were like, lovely to see you, Adrian. Please come down to London on your time, take a half day, pay £120 on the train to get there, and I'll see you for half an hour. And it's like, that doesn't feel particularly fair to me. So I thought, you know what? Do I know a recruitment agency in the north of the country? And my answer to that was no. So that was one element. And then the other element was the deals that I'd done from a sponsorship perspective. I was like, no one really had kind of absolutely blew me away in that experience. So I thought, you know what? I've got a half decent black book. See if we can flick some of those pages over and make some money out of them. And that's how it started. It's like at the time I didn't have my own capital to put in. So I did go and negotiate a venture capitalist start. So they put a significant amount of money in, which I've mentioned before on a previous podcast. And that's where it started. So, 10 years down the line, lots more grey hair, bigger midriff. What more can I say?
Now, we're in, as I mentioned at the beginning, a new location to film the podcast in, part of the SGI and Sporting Jobs office. I'm guessing this probably wasn't the kind of location you started in.
It wasn't. No, we were in literally a stone throw from the Hawthorns. How bad, from my perspective, driving to the Hawthorns every day for 6 years, to be literally next door to it, it was a bit surreal, really. We didn't last very long in there. We shared with the investors that made their position clear with the company at the start. And I was like, we've got to get into central Birmingham. So we ended up going to a place called Edmund House, which is just down the road from here. And then we moved again, and then again, and we've ended up here.
Ian, you're probably watching all this while you're at Blues, building your career there, and obviously climbing to the heights that you scaled in the end. But what was it like? Were you thinking, what's he up to? What's going on here? What's it all about?
Yeah, well, I think I've mentioned previously, I've always had a very, very close relationship with Adrian ever since he employed me at the Blues many years ago. He's always been, a bit of a mentor to me. We've always had a great business relationship. But I was just genuinely excited, a little bit jealous, if I'm perfectly honest, because I've got a little bit of entrepreneurship in me, so I like to see what Adrian was doing and delivered so successfully on club side, to then transfer that into the agency world was fantastic. And I think I was probably one of the first people to use the services, certainly of Sporting Jobs, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think we brought on Josh Davis.
Oh, yeah.
So Josh Davis, now sort of head of partnerships director, I don't know his exact title, at Birmingham City Football Club, but employed him as a sales executive through Sporting Jobs 10 years ago. Exemplary service, as always. Josh was an outstanding candidate. He ended up leaving after a couple of years, went to Warsaw again, which Sporting Jobs placed, then went to Norwich, then went into the agency world himself, and he's ended up back literally probably 18 months ago now as a pretty senior leader at a football club that's only going in one direction, and that's upwards. So it's fair play. He's done an awesome job. He's brought in an outstanding team. We always talk about the culture. The culture's second to none in this business. It's a real good quality foundation.
Must be great seeing that growth. Somebody that you've worked with. I mean, Harry, from a Sporting Jobs point of view, that's kind of the dream, I guess, really.
Absolutely. I think the one thing that I would mention about Adrian's journey as well is that you probably don't realise from the outside looking in that when you become a chief exec at, say, a West Brom or somewhere like that, the more senior you go up the pyramid, the more commitments you have after hours in the week, of a weekend. Again, more match days, you're in Europe. So all of a sudden now it's a chief exec has got to be there at the weekends, got to be there one night of a week. Maybe if they're involved in the women's team, then they're on a Sunday. All of a sudden it becomes this all-encompassing and all-consuming thing. So the fact that you've flicked into the agency space, I can understand that, if you see what I mean.
So really, you did this to take Easy Street.
Yeah, that's it.
Exactly.
We all know it's very simple running your own business,
hours
right?
off. How can I manifest that?
The thing I would say, there's the pressure in all sorts of different circles. There's pressure at football club. There's pressure here, in the world that where we're at. But it's very unforgiving when you work in a football club. There is so much time consumed, like Harry's just alluded to. Monday to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, women's teams. It's just a lot, and we've all got small families, and that's, fundamentally, business is very, very important, but our family is more important. So you've got to find that balance.
Let's talk highlights then over that 10 years. I mean, what's the first big moment, do you think, for Sporting Group International?
Well, I think I mentioned this as well. I don't want this to be like a bit of a hark back to the archives, but the first deal we did was a recruitment placement. And I managed to negotiate my replacement at West Brom, which a lot of people are like, well, hold on a minute, that sounds a bit dodgy. But it wasn't actually. It actually ended up being with the new owners. Okay. So the old board had handed over this recruitment pack for a number of people. And Simon King, who's now at Stoke, was known to the new chief executive, a guy called Martin Goodman, who came from Stoke. So the connection was Simon was really good pals with Paul Lakin, who was the previous commercial director at Stoke, and Martin was the finance director at Stoke. So when Martin said, do you know this Simon King guy? Obviously, Paul gave a glowing reference. And he's like, right, that's our man. And it was like complete luck, really, that we had that candidate. And there was others in the process we didn't have. And that's how it came about. So I was like, when I got a phone call from Martin saying, Adrian, we want to push Simon through and we want to offer him, I was like, get in. This is easy.
And do you know, I mean, again, Simon King is another exemplary example of a candidate that's like, started off in, an executive sort of capacity. And they're now like, what's Simon now? Chief Operating Officer?
Commercial officer.
Yeah, CEO
at Stoke City. And, I think we've alluded to the fact before he'll be a CEO one day, that's for sure. So, yeah.
I know you don't want to talk about it, Adrian, but Kazoo has got to come up as well. I mean, it's not
we
something...
did. We've done deals before. Our first deal was with Edgbaston Cricket Club.
Okay.
That was with Luke, they were Aston Villa's kit manufacturer. Mm-hmm. That was officially our first sponsorship deal, which I look back and think, bloody hell, it took us a long time to get that. But we had some near misses. We had probably the biggest near miss I've had in my career was I got lambasted by the industry for claiming that we were going to do a 10-club sleeve deal, which effectively was when the Premier League gave the clubs the option to sell the sleeve. This was going back to 2016. I put a crazy notion together that I want to be the guy that does those 10 deals. And they were like, are you mad? I was like, no, I'm going to phone Richard Masters, who's a fellow Aston Villa fan, Premier League. Well, he actually was commercial director at the Premier League at the time, now chief exec. I said, Richard, look, this is what I want to do. He says, do what you want, Adrian. He says, as long as the clubs agree to it, you can do what the hell you like. We don't need our approval. It's nothing to do with us. So anyway, I was like, right, how can I get a brand or brands engaged with 10 shirt sleeves? I phoned all the clubs. They were like, yeah, we're up for it. So the range was probably from $1.5 million down to 500,000, depending on the size of the club. So it's kind of quite a nice delta to deal with. And I got an offer. I had an offer in writing. I shared it on our WhatsApp group, actually, from a very, very big software company.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, this is just, how can this be possible? And fundamentally, where it fell back was that the deal that we'd structured with this company was in, it contravened the Premier League rule.
Oh, no.
Because they'd done a separate deal with another company in the same space.
Right.
So I was like, literally, it's like gone from there to there in like milliseconds, thinking, this could have been effectively, it would have been a 10 million
Were the
deal.
clubs aware that they were all what they were all getting?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
100%. I negotiated all the clubs what they were getting out of the deal, and they were like, Adrian, if you can land this, you literally will have. We'll put a statue outside the Premier League office. And
Were they aware of the actual brand as well?
They weren't aware of the brand now.
No, fine, okay. I was going to say,
But they
one of
knew that
them-
the club down the road were £1 million more.
So
or-
they knew that Burnley was going to get Y and
Yeah.
West Ham was going to get Z, because we'd done it based on shirt values.
Sure.
Kind of indication was like, well, if a club had got this shirt value versus another club, it was difficult for me to do everybody on the level playing field, because we also did a lot of work on fan base size. We did a lot of work on how many TV games they had per season. So there's a lot of metrics around it, like a really intense piece of work. So I could go back to the clubs and say, look, we think your value is this, and this is the reason why. And they might say, okay, well, what's Aston Villa getting out of this? And I'd say they're getting this. And they'll be like, okay, that seems fair. So, yeah.
So close, but yet so far.
Well, you know what? That's the story of SGI, in effect.
But, I mean, we should talk about the biggest deal, though. What was Olympique Marseille? Is that the one? Or
That's the biggest recorded deal. I actually looked back on our accounting software system, and we had in one day just under £1 million worth of revenue drop, which obviously I'm not disclosing the full amount of the deal, but to have £1 million hit your bank account in one day, not many people can
what
say.
did you do to mark that? Did you do anything particularly?
Took it all out.
No, you went to the bank and said, fill this suitcase up. But literally as a business owner, you remember those scenarios. And at the time, I'm not that money orientated, so it wasn't a huge thing for me. It was like I was used to big numbers at the Premier League clubs that I worked for. So it wasn't kind of like a huge, massive game changer for me. It's more about what we're going to do with it. Are we going to reinvest it? Are we going to not? So naturally, when you do accumulate that kind of income, you do sometimes wake up in the morning thinking, oh, hold on, is this real?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
But it soon goes. It's like
of course.
you find other
On to the
things.
next.
Yeah, it's on to the next, and that's just the way. We're in a high-profile industry with high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
Would you say now, looking back 10 years ago as well, is there far more agencies now, people trying to do that? Or
I don't think there's more agencies. I think, interesting, I've had a chat yesterday with a guy who did a deal. He's based in Mauritius. He studied as a lawyer, and he managed to secure a partnership deal for Fulham, which seems quite a strange scenario that he ended up doing it. And it was very much a circumstantial deal. So he was in the right place at the right time. But the difficult thing with this game is you can be in the right place at the right time once, right?
Yeah, okay.
It's how do you do it twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times? And then how do you make the business sustainable? Because it is an ebb and a flow industry. It very much depends on which way the wind's blowing, what's available in the market at the time. How is, the sponsorship market has been depressed because of just global macroeconomic climate. People are not spending money. Big companies aren't spending money, and I think if you looked at before pre-COVID, the sponsorship market was in a different space to what it is now. And as I said, and I said on previous podcasts, we managed to secure effectively 8 shirt deals without speaking face to face with a human. So what does that tell you? That's okay. Like, you don't have to get in front of people to do business in our game, but by getting in front of people, you add more value to that relationship than if you would just doing it on Teams, because you then just become a transaction. So, oh yeah, these guys bought a shirt deal. Yeah, well done to them. And then all of a sudden they're there in a process with someone else that they're dealing with, which is the sponsor. We get moved away, and it's like, we'll see you if you bring us the next one. Okay. It's kind of can be quite arm's length.
I think to add to Harry's question as well, I think from my experience, clubs have got a lot more sophisticated commercially. The teams are bigger and bigger. They've got big, huge partnership activation teams that can do the delivery, separate teams that are doing the acquisition. People all around the world with different offices all around the world, particularly in the Premier League, but even Championship, is getting more and more sophisticated. So yeah, it's a difficult market, but
I think the head of partnerships role has diminished. Harry will tell you, that's just not a role we would hire for anymore.
Okay.
So it's like literally would be someone that would be like a West Brom, would only be one person managing the partner program, which wasn't huge, but they would take full autonomy for that. Those roles have diminished in terms of certainly going, the bottom end of the Championship, League One, League Two, they just don't exist. So we're finding now, got a lot of retained work at the moment in certain leagues and sports. They just don't have commercial departments. It's like, well, how are you generating revenue? Yeah. It's like, well, we're not really. We're just taking phone calls from people. It's like, well, we can be the proactive arm for you. We can get you in front of people. That's what we're doing day in, day out globally. So if you want us to focus in on this region in the UK and speak to 500 businesses in 12 weeks, let us know and we'll do it.
Had you noticed that then, Harry? That swing already started by the time you joined Sporting
We
Jobs?
We had it this week, actually. We met a club in League One that were probably and ahhing as to go for a new head of commercial and invest in their commercial team. And actually, we advised them to go for a commercial agency, because you might spend £70,000 to £100,000 on a head of commercial that has to individually themselves go out and canvas for a front of shirt asset. With less investment, you can actually unlock a agency like these guys that are day in, day out, have a team upstairs of people that are speaking to brands that probably will see a return quicker.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you can literally turn it on day one. Whereas obviously, if you're going to recruit for someone, you've got to go through that whole sort of 3-4 month cycle of actually recruiting them. Then once they've get their foot through the door, they've got to get under the bonnet of the actual club, the opportunities. Whereas we've done it, we've delivered, we've done it for between me and Adrian 40 plus years, and the rest of the team. So, we can deliver that, and be that sort of conduit between, obviously them, bringing someone in, full time through Sporting Jobs and obviously taking it on from there.
And I think where they've decided to go, that club, is to maybe engage an agency, SGI, for the next 3 to 6 months, and then onboard a new head of commercial kind of alongside that, if that makes sense, which makes a lot of sense to all of us.
And I think a big thing as well that you don't get by hiring individuals is market trends. Unless they've been in the industry and unless they've been across it for a lot of years, we see trends where we see, it's like a fad within the sponsorship space. We know things that literally are switching off. We know things that are kind of switching on, and we know things that are very hot, because we are getting clubs slightly higher at the pyramid to ask us to look at certain sectors that the clubs at the lower levels or in other sports that aren't as as exciting and widespread as Premier League football. They won't know that, because they don't have anybody literally giving them that guidance and advice. Where we could literally bring a county championship cricket team a Premier League blueprint. Where they're not going to get that by hiring a head of commercial that's worked at another cricket club. And that sounds really harsh, but you kind of play with the cards you're dealt, and we can bring some good cards to the table for these clubs.
I think we should probably move on to, we talked about how sporting clubs have evolved over and how they look at, their workforce. I mean, for you as well, you're building from the ground up, basically. So you're thinking culture for the company that you want, the kind of people you want. Is that something that you found difficult to start with? Because, I guess previously you've gone in somewhere and gone, this culture, we need to either change it or stick with it, whereas you're starting from scratch now.
Yeah, I think I was quite mercenary not maybe at Birmingham, but certainly at West Brom. I don't think I left many people from the old regime. And that was just because, they didn't fit my mindset.
Is that fairly commonplace though in football clubs? If someone new comes in, I feel like it might be.
I think you can apply the right pressure.
Yeah.
Certainly in sales and commercial. I'd been brought in from another Midlands club, with a fairly good CV from a high profile managing director that gave me a really good testimonial for what I could do. And your expectations are kind of set from the day you walk in. So it's kind of like, well, we did that last time in the Premier League, that amount of revenue, but we would want 5x of that. So we want 5 times more. So how will you go about doing that? And it was like, okay, well, let me just get my head around it all and come back to you. And so then I built a plan and said, right, okay, this is what I think I can deliver within the first year in the Premier League. And I think we're about 170% of that target. And it's kind of like you make a rod for your back for the following year. And like every year I've got to put £1 million on that commercial figure. And the only way I could do that was just commoditising the shirt, because that's the biggest ticket item. So I literally did, in 5 seasons, 5 shirt deals. And everybody's like, you're going to have a heart attack because you can't keep putting yourself under that pressure. Yeah. And I was like, well, I back myself. We're always one of
the faint-hearted, that's for
sure.
sure.
We're one of the clubs that we've seen as probably one of the most modestly priced in the league. And as long as we stayed in the league, there was always value. Yeah. So I just looked at it and thought, it's going to be either, I think we did 3 betting, 2 non-betting. So there was value both sides, and there wasn't a huge drop-off between non-betting and betting at the time. And there were 2 good brands, QuickBooks and Zoopla. They're on, one of them's now on West Ham sleeve, and Zoopla is all over TV, and we know who they are. And, so both of them at the time were good brands. So yeah.
Harry, to bring you in then. So at what point did you join Sporting Jobs? How many years ago are we talking on that 10-year journey?
3.5 years ago now, nearly.
Okay. What was it that brought you? I mean, how did you first meet Adrian?
I'm not sure if I've told this story before, but I used to work, basically came out of school, blagged my way onto a graduate scheme at Pertemps, actually. And I was really fortunate to be like the youngest person on their graduate academy. And did really well there, sort of spent 4.5 years there, climbing the ladder from junior, making the tea, to actually running a desk. And went off into the world of sales and everything else. And just out of the blue, really, I was contacted by somebody from my days at Pertemps with an opportunity of, Harry, we remember you from Pertemps. You loved your football. You played football. Do you still play football? It's a sports desk. It's kind of lay dormant for a couple of years through COVID, which the company had done. And I came and met Adrian and the other shareholders and kind of fell in love with it, really. I didn't actually appreciate that it was a thing. I just assumed that football clubs, cricket clubs, rugby clubs would just do their own recruitment, or, you put an advert out because the size of the club, but actually that comes with its own problems. And never looked back, really. I think I presented a business plan and touch wood, it's gone really well.
And Ian, for you, I mean, obviously long-standing relationship here. I think we've talked about this on a previous episode, that it almost felt like it was always going to happen, that you were going to work together at some stage, wasn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've been here nearly 2 years now in April. It's absolutely flown by, to be perfectly honest. But me and Adrian were talking probably a good 12, 18 months before I joined, to be perfectly honest. Just, it was clear to the wider world, the wider sporting world, that SGI were only going in one way. It was an upward trajectory. Global territories opening, amazing staff being recruited, wonderful offices, and deals being done fundamentally. Yeah. And, you could see quite clearly that, they weren't messing. They were with the big boys. They were there, on that periphery. So the fact that Adrian was looking for a managing director to run the UK division, take it to new levels, it was just an easy decision for me. I've worked with Adrian for a long time. I know him as a person. He's always been fantastic to me, always supported me, helped me. But then also to have a role that I'm so passionate about, which is doing partnerships and bringing brands and rights holders together. It was just a match made in heaven. And it was in my city. I was living in Birmingham, didn't have to uproot my kid, my nipper. And so that's part of the reason why it just felt right. And it was the right time for me to move.
Harry, you brought up COVID. We should talk about this. I mean, a lot of businesses didn't make it through. It changed the landscape completely. How was it for you, Adrian?
the best time we've had in our
Really?
most
Okay.
recent history. It was like you couldn't have, if you were going to put a utopian moment around making benefit from a pandemic in a professional sports entity. And I think, not that I quote and going to put this in blood, but I think we would probably have negotiated one of the first COVID sport-related contract clauses in potentially sport, if not professional football, where we had to put a mechanism in place that the value of the contract that we secured for the clubs was reflected to the fan audiences, as in through the gates. And that was, if there's no fans in the stadium for X amount of games, the fee would come down by Y, so on and so on. If there was 25%, it would be this, 50, 75. And at the time, it kind of like, it was a real kind of mathematical, calculation, but it made a lot of sense because you weren't getting what you would have got pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, because if there weren't fans in the stadium, you didn't have a chance to do hospitality, you didn't have a chance to do engagements, your brand wasn't seen by those people live. So I understood why we had to do it, but for the clubs taking the narrative from us to say, well, we're not going to give you the full amount unless you can deliver us the full story. And anyway, we managed to negotiate it, and I don't think it actually took place. It actually was there were any rebates in the contract, which is great because ultimately that means there's full value for the club and we get full commission. So it was.
So you kind of bucked the trend, really. I mean, was that a growth moment then for you during COVID in a weird way?
Yeah, it was. And believe it or not, we even decamped the office back to my house. We kicked the kids out of the playroom and we put a 4-man desk in the office. And believe it or not, it was like Clapham Junction at our house. It's like the doorbell would ring in the morning and be like, oh, hello, yeah. And a lot of people at lunch were like using the microwave and using the fridge. And I think my wife turned around and said, Adrian, please tell me this is not the future. I said, look, it's only for a short period of time. We just literally need to, making sure we didn't contravene any of the rules.
Sure.
But that's the only way that I'm a firm believer in, things happen when people are around each other, and we were sensible. We didn't compromise anybody. We were creating the bubble, and we did deals as a result of being together. Where I think if we'd have done that Teams environment, someone half a mile down the road on Teams talking to you about a deal, it's just not the same. So we definitely benefited by being together. We didn't benefit from booting my kids out of a room that they loved and people using our conveniences left, right and centre. But all part of the history, needs must.
You mentioned as well, we were talking about the COVID stuff the other day, and it just so happened that literally about 5 days before the COVID lockdown hits, the end of your current lease.
Our lease, and we had an office just literally over the road from here. The lease finished, must be 5 or 6 days before. And I don't know why, something in the back of my head was saying, don't renew. And we didn't renew it. And we were going to go over to the investors that got a new office in West Bromwich, where we ended up going back to anyway after COVID. And it was just kind of like, it was a really strange entrepreneurial instinct.
Yeah.
I just thought, something doesn't feel right. I'm not going to do it. We need a bigger office anyway. And we didn't renew.
Would that have changed things completely if you had renewed? I mean, in terms of that?
It wasn't a huge expense to the business, but it's just a noose around your neck. You've got like a facility that you go through COVID. It wouldn't have made the business bust. But it's just a space you couldn't occupy because of COVID, and, with all the transport issues and people, just not going to work. It was like a blessing in disguise, really. So it went on coffee and cakes at my house most of the time.
Let's talk about the future then, because I mean we're 10 years in, but there's a long way to go yet, I'm sure. So what does the future look like for Sporting Group International and Sporting Jobs?
Well, these two guys are the future. In terms of I'm obviously not going anywhere. That's for sure. But I do want to make sure that the business isn't reliant on solely me and my decisions. And I think if you speak to any entrepreneur, having a successful business is actually it being able to function without you having to make all the decisions around small and big things. But, my role is going to change this year. I'm definitely going to get closer and back into the revenue generation space, which when you're growing a business, you kind of slip away from, because you're bringing people in, you're training them up, you're giving them guidance, you're working alongside them, they're taking the deal forward, you're just supporting them. And I felt as if I've lost out a little bit in the last 3 years by not having that, like, feel the burn of losing a deal or feeling the euphoria of doing a deal. You know, kind of sometimes you lose that feeling, and I like it. And it's for how I've got here today. You know, I like doing deals. I like, feeling that I've accomplished something. And that's not to say that I don't, begrudge anybody around me that does deals, because Harry and Ian both have proven, they don't need me to do deals, and they've got very successful, businesses to operate. But I do think I'd like to chip in. I do think that I have got a little bit more to offer than probably I have done in the last 3 years. But yeah, 2026, big year, and then we'll see.
He actually said earlier that in 10 years he's going to be selling coconuts on the beach in the Caribbean.
Oh, that's the plan. Okay.
It's a bit like that.
And from a sporting jobs point of view, what's the plan for that?
I think for us, we're still kind of on a upward trajectory, really. Coming out of COVID, as I say, and being here for 3 years, we're still in an infancy, and it almost feels a bit like we're just coming through that startup phase for me. Continue to grow revenue year on year, which we've done, and we've been fortunate to do so. But obviously integrate the new members of the team, which is happening as we speak, and kind of really have some sector-specific areas of the team, really. So Alex, if you've seen him, he's 7 foot tall. He's clearly going to be the rugby guy. But, all have our own specialisms and continue to bolster that team, really.
So we talked about the future for Sporting Group International Sporting Jobs. What about the future of sport? We talked a little bit in the podcast about how things have evolved over the last 10 years. How do you see them going over the next 10? How are these football clubs or sports clubs generally going to change? Do you kind of seeing that from the sporting kind of jobs point of view?
Yeah, I am. I think the pyramid is getting stronger, if that makes sense. We actually met somebody really senior at the National League today, for example, and he mentioned that M&A is a real big thing in National League at the moment, and that will lead to really big private equity-backed companies and firms buying smaller clubs and trying to recreate and replicate the Wrexhams and these Salford City stories, but even Macclesfield. You go further down the pyramid, Hensford Town, have a look at their stadium. I think they're playing step 4, but they've got LED perimeters. It's going to go all the way through the football pyramid, I think, which will create massive opportunities for us.
Adrian, what's your thoughts?
I think that we're really fortunate, and where you sometimes don't find you can be in a club is what's going on in the market, what's moving quick, and you get so encased in the world of a club, literally what's going on around it, literally servicing customers, keeping them happy. There's always a match day coming out you've got to focus on, and you might drop your sales activities off just to get through to your match day. But one thing that we've got massive bandwidth with is literally just hearing what the market is doing and listening to what other clubs are doing. And we might find that there's a sector that we didn't even think about that a club mentions to us just in passing or through on a call with them, that we're like, hold on a minute, we really should be looking into that. So that can then stimulate an approach for us to do something different. So I just think the agency space just gives you a completely different kind of trajectory and also vision around the new stuff. Because, take my son as an example, he's not bothered about going to live games. He'll watch a little bit of a game. He won't watch all of it. He'll want to literally engage with live score, and that's the way he gets his scores through. There's just the tech space, we all know, it's the new crude oil. It has been for the last 20 years, but everybody knows if you don't and you're not moving with it, you're going to get left behind. And that's what does worry me a little bit about institutionalized clubs, is they don't have the right personnel to make the informed decisions for them. And that's something that hopefully we can, by bringing expert companies to the table and say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? All of a sudden that helps us add more value to the club, not just bringing them money, but bringing them a thought process around other avenues to generate revenue and deal with fan experience. So that's where I think we will move quickly. There's always going to be something new on the horizon, and we're in a great position to take it. Same with recruitment. Recruitment's changed dramatically from years ago. You had to go to a recruitment agency and meet them face to face. You don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to rock up to this venue and see Harry to engage.
We'd like
with
them
him.
to, though.
Yes.
But it doesn't happen anymore. They're like, well, no, I'm not travelling. I'll speak to you on Teams. So all of a sudden, that's a process that's changed overnight. Very similar in the sponsorship space. It probably would be, we should go and shake the hand of a club before we work with them. But it doesn't always have to be the case. I think Ian is a big advocate, and so have I, getting in front of people. But it's choosing the right time to go and see them and why. We're looking at it now. Abby and our operations director, he's literally saying, guys, we just need to agree. Why are we going to these things? Why are we doing these things? And what results do we want from them? As long as we're clear what we want out of them, we'll do them. And that obviously makes a lot of sense.
Does that make sense as well in terms of how you see the next 10 years and evolving?
100%. I mean, what's really surprised me is, taking the football side of things away from obviously what we're talking about, is just how many new opportunities are coming to the table. Let's face it, the consumer nowadays are consuming everything via their mobile. That's it. So there's so many, we've talked about this in the past, there's so many new niche opportunities that are being unearthed, that are going out on broadcast, across so many different sports and entertainment and sport are crossing over together now. You're seeing it all the time, where they're just merging together, so it's just evolving all the time. And I think, again, just touching on what Adrian was saying earlier, 10 years ago, it wasn't really so much around data, metrics, all that kind of stuff. It is now. It's science-backed. It's science-backed metrics, science-backed data. Whenever we're looking at doing a deal with a brand or a rights holder, the brand, before they even make any kind of decision or before they even put it up to the decision makers, is they're doing their due diligence. And their due diligence involves clear, defined metrics, analysing, okay, well, how many social media followers they've got, what's their database size, what's the broadcast lens looking like, how many people are watching it. So, and that's just constantly evolving, and it's all about tech. Tech is just evolving, which means that everything we're doing is evolving as well.
Well, that draws this episode of the Deal Room Sports to a close. If you want to find out more about Sporting Jobs or Sporting Group International, do find them on LinkedIn. We should probably close by singing happy birthday, shouldn't we?
Absolutely not.
No,
Absolutely
no.
not.
I think my face needs to go in that cake.
Okay, come on, Harry, get the cake. All right. No, he values his job too much. We'll call it a day there. Thank you, gentlemen.
Cheers.
Thanks, Ed.
Cheers, Ed.
Cheers.